Insight Unlimited, which is a consulting firm devoted to the principle of moving great ideas to effective action. She also held positions in the governor's office of Virginia, the Maryland State House of Representatives, and the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation and the Institute for Women's Policy Research. And most recently, she served as the executive director of the National Council of Negro Women, leading that organization at a particular crucial moment in history following the death of civil rights and women's rights icon, Dr. Dorothy Height. Avis, it's an honor to have you on the show tonight on America's Hope.
It is such an honor to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, with your list of credits and things that you've accomplished, one could arguably say that you understand politics better than most people on the outside looking in. There are some people who actually hate where we are politically in this country because it divides us. Give me your assessment of what happened in New Hampshire, and going forward, what does Nikki Haley face and what does Donald Trump face as the front runner?
Absolutely. So New Hampshire takes great pride in being that first primary in the nation. And the people there, I believe, relish the moment to be able to move in the way that they want to move and not necessarily in the way that the pundits predict that they will move, right? And so I think what we saw happened with this particular primary was, though the outcome was much like many would have expected in terms of the winner and the person who came in second, the distance between the two, I believe, was a little bit unexpected. Prior to that particular primary, we saw polls that suggested that Nikki Haley should have lost by much more than she actually did. And strategically, her coming out when she did and kind of the concept, not really give her campaign a little bit of life to South Carolina and beyond. So I think that she overperformed what many people thought she would. And for her, that's at least a symbolic win.
Symbolic win. Nevertheless, she faces a challenge yet again in South Carolina, which is coming up. It's her home state where she served as governor. And yet she's trailing in the polls behind the frontrunner, Donald Trump, who is the former president of the United States. How can she hope to garner that support, particularly given the fact that the man she gave the Senate to, which is Tim Scott, is now endorsing the former president of the United States?
Oh, my goodness. You hit the nail on the head there. South Carolina actually is going to be, I believe, much more difficult for her than New Hampshire was, even though that is her own state, even though that is the state where she was the governor. She comes in there in a much more, I would say, highly conservative primary pool. As we know, in New Hampshire, it's an open primary, and it famously is very, very open to the fact that a lot of independents like to make their voices known on that day. And when we look at the exit polls from New Hampshire, we saw that a lot of her support was garnered by independents, and maybe even a few that maybe thought of themselves as Democrats, even if they weren't registered as Democrats. In the South, even though technically in South Carolina, even though technically it's an open primary, traditionally it's primarily Republicans that show up and very conservative Republicans. It's a much more difficult landscape for her. And unfortunately for her, I don't expect her to be anywhere near as close to Donald Trump as she was in the New Hampshire outcome.
She has.
Absolutely. I think in many ways, obviously it would be politically embarrassing to lose in your home state. She might want to consider a number of different factors, consider what might be her future if she wants to run again in the next cycle. And if that's the case, does it make sense even for her to bow out before she gets trounced in her home state? She has said right now that she's determined to do it. In fact, she said right now that she wants to go through Super Tuesday. But I believe the real decider here is the pockets. Is she going to have the money past South Carolina if she ends up losing as badly as many of us believe that she will? Particularly, as you mentioned, having that almost kind of stake in her heart with having Tim Scott endorse Donald Trump right before the primary in New Hampshire. So she's in this space where she's moving into very difficult circumstances. If she loses really badly there and she begins to have impacts on her funding, I don't know if it'll be possible for her to get to Super Tuesday. I think ultimately her goal is to try to stay in this long enough to see if some intervening factor happens with one of these 90-some counts, or if something happens that is an outlier event that would hurt her, then she last alternative standing. But I don't know if she'll be able to last even that.
Yeah, you're speaking of the president's legal woes, obviously, and if something goes wrong and he should get some sort of conviction, you're thinking that maybe she would like to step in at that time and be the front runner?
Yes, I think she's hoping for some sort of outside intervention, shall we say, because really that's what would be necessary for her to win this nomination. The bottom line is, like it or not, this really is Trump's party at this point.
But in a general election, what does the former president of the United States face in his battle against Joe Biden?
Well, his biggest challenge in the general election is that the entire country will be voting and not just the right wing of the Republican Party, which, not to denigrate the Republican Party, but it's just the nature of primaries that you tend to have the most extreme wings of each party that come out in force during primary seasons. And so when he is the person that is the standard bearer for his party and the entire electorate can vote, including independents, including Democrats, including more moderate Republicans, that's where he begins to run into challenges. That now the thing that is helping him, interestingly, is that, we have a situation where President Biden is having problems with his base, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with a lot of the foreign policy dynamics that are going on right now, not the least of which is the war with Israel and Hamas and the implications on Palestinians that many people are completely outraged by that are part of the Democratic base. So in many ways, this is going to be a war of the strength of the bases as well as the degree to which those who are independents are able to come out in force, or if people are turned off altogether by all the shenanigans and decide to stay at home. This will be a very, very, honestly, less predictable than I think for example, the Democrats would like to see. I think they might be beginning to worry right now, and for good reason, if they don't shore up their base.
Let's talk about.
Senators are going on months now negotiating changes to border policy. However, Republicans are hitting some sticking points. They say parole authority is one of their main concerns. They accuse the president of abusing this authority to simply release illegal immigrants into the country, and they say they want guarantees that this is going to stop.
Up until this administration, about 5,000 awards of parole a year. Now we're granting it to hundreds of thousands of people.
And I think that the parole issue is going to be the deciding factor.
But now there's a broader issue. That is Senate Republicans lashing out at their own leadership, that is Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, for keeping the vast majority of the body in the dark.
One of the gentlemen under the interstate living under a refrigerator box knows more about it than I do.
Let's release monthly Ukraine aid if the numbers of people come across the border and go down. Leader McConnell said, no way.
Senator Mike Lee is now trying to push for his Republican colleagues to require at least 3 weeks for them to actually read the bill before they're made to vote on it. This is a starkly different timeline than what Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell wanted. He wanted this bill to be done and voted on by the end of this week. Democrats, for their part, are now saying that Republicans are holding much-needed Ukraine aid hostage.
There are some on the fringes who are unfortunately, though, trying to do precisely that. To sink this supplemental package from afar.
Aid for Ukraine, and it's disgusting. It's disgusting that Trump and other Republicans are willing to turn their back on the Ukrainians.
A group led by Senator Rick Scott expressing that they're furious with this bill and how McConnell has handled it, even going so far as to say that this is an example of Senate Republicans launching political warfare on their House colleagues, since the lower chamber likely won't pass it anyway. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Affiliation from Democrat to Independent last October. As an independent, Kennedy didn't compete recently, but he is optimistic that he will have an opportunity to be president. Joining results from New Hampshire, the presidential race going forward, we have A. Scott Bolden. He's a former Democrat. A. Scott Bolden, thank you so much. It's great to have you back on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, this change meant that no delegates went on in year. Now that it's accused disenfranchised state, could this actually come back to bite President Biden and the
They're prime in South Carolina, which represents the core base of the party. And it's not like we're not going to be in New Hampshire. We just were in Hampton. So our feelings stay here in D.C. We're first, and quite frankly, because 8 out of every Democrat, we're all fine. I think we fine.
Now, one major difference last night in terms of the primary was independent vote. 39% of registered voters are independent.
Are looking at this president and saying, "Nah, I don't think so." They're looking at Trump and say, "Well, maybe." And they have issues with voting. And then there's the black vote. We're not sure what side African Americans will choose. Talk to me from the perspective of what you think black women are looking at with regard to either or, Trump or Biden.
Absolutely. So black women are a very, very pragmatic voting bloc. They are looking at the bottom line, like what is going to be the impact of this election on my pocketbook, in my family, on my housing costs, if my health care, all of those things. And being very pragmatic, black women have been very, very loyal to the Democratic Party, understanding that it's not perfect, but when comparing it to the alternative, that really is the base of the base for the Democratic Party. The big question is when you disperse that out generationally, we don't see that same sort of conditioning, shall we say, with younger black women. So that age issue, that generational dynamic is true even for the most loyal segment of the Democratic Party. And so to me, Joe Biden really has to be very careful in his messaging. He has to go out there and let people understand that not only is he fighting for them, that he has delivered certain things for them that they sort of fought for when he first received their vote. He needs to remind them of the things that have happened that they asked for, and that because of their pressure, he delivered. But also, he needs to be able to start to create a very stark contrast between what a second term of a Biden administration would look like and what it would look like to take the White House and hand it back to a Trump administration, and what would be at stake if that happens.
As you know, Trump is gaining some ground among some black voters, Republican black voters, but he's also gaining some ground among black men who are looking at him and saying, well, I think he might be the better of the two candidates. Talk to me about that dynamic and what if...
Even though she claims that she had a really great showing, she lost by maybe 11 points, maybe even 12 points. She was endorsed by the largest newspaper. She was endorsed by the very popular governor, and she still lost. And a bunch of independents, about 43% of all the voters in New Hampshire are independents. And of course, they can vote in this primary. And about 4,000 former Democrats re-registered as Republicans or independents so they could vote against Donald Trump. Going forward, she's not even registered to run in Nevada. And in South Carolina, according to most of the polls, she's down anywhere from 20 to 40 to 50 points. So I don't see a path going forward. Also, there's this. The longer she stays in, Kelly, the more money Donald Trump has to spend in order to fight her off. And there is a bunch of negative sound bites that Joe Biden is just piling up to lay on Donald Trump in the fall when Donald Trump becomes the eventual nominee. And finally, there's this. Assuming for a moment that Donald Trump loses to Joe Biden, can you imagine what the post
about Joe, and there are things that I don't like about him, but I do believe that he's a man of character. He's cared. He's about his challenges with his family. He's lost members of his family, his wife, his son Beau. I do believe that he does have some. Do I believe that he may be the best job that we've seen?
Talk to me about your on point, Eden.
Well, I'm a slinger for both parties. I have friends, very, very good friends, in the Republican Party as well as the Democratic Party. It's witnessing that. You're treasonous. If you're a Democrat on the other side, You know, you look at a Republican, you're a fascist. This is ridiculous. You have to come. My shows are designed to be unbiased. They're designed to give information. Even argue with that brings the right and the left together. And a Democrat try to see it find common. We do not, I repeat, we do not agree on everything. We've never been a country to agree on everything. Find common ground and come together. That's what it's all about. And everybody agrees something's wrong. The Americans at the end. I have a bunch of people in my family who served in this military. They're liberals for the most part, but they went to fight. Liberals feet under, as well as conservatives who were 6 feet under, who fought and died for this country. They took. We've got to remember that we are Americans, and is my hope, and that should be America's hope.
Thank you, my friend.
Times is in the Lone Star State, bringing us firsthand reporting. Meanwhile, Texas Senator Ted Cruz gives a heated answer while speaking with NTD in Washington today. NTD's Arian Pazdar has a border update.
Homeland Security sent yet another letter to Texas demanding unrestricted access to Shelby Park. The department writes the state has alleged that Shelby Park is open to the public, but we do not believe this statement is accurate, adding that Texas continues to restrict U.S. Border Patrol's access to the park. Now, the letter also cites a Monday Supreme Court ruling which says that the federal government is allowed to remove razor wire deployed by Texas. And on Tuesday, a spokesperson for Texas Department of Public Safety commented on this Supreme Court ruling while talking to our sister media, the Epoch Times. Watch.
Supreme Court decision gives Border Patrol the legal authority to cut the concertina wire. Now, it doesn't change operations as far as with DPS or National Guard and what we're doing right now at Shelby Park. There is still restricted access to U.S. Border Patrol to enter the park.
Texas, meanwhile, continues to install more fencing and razor wire. Texas Senator Ted Cruz on Wednesday told NTD he supports what state authorities are doing.
And so Texas is stepping up to defend our state. I'm glad we are. But the reason Texas is doing so is because Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer and the Democrats affirmatively want this invasion.
The agency doesn't currently have a plan to take down the wire, although the administration went to court over the issue.
So the clearing process will start immediately, or how does that work?
So it allows us to have access to the border. So
no timetable right now when that operation is over?
No.
The Biden administration previously explained that Border Patrol needs unrestricted access to all areas in case of emergencies. That's, for example, to provide first aid to law enforcement or to illegal immigrants crossing the river. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun is meeting with Senator.
Helps and hopefully will continue to help every family in the state.
They're also introducing a bill to remove the state's revenue shortfall reserve fund and to accelerate the state income cut.
So you're going to continue to give Georgia a couple dollars back, which is great. What about the rehab?
With Senate results, minority leader said the proposed legislation falls short of addressing pressing issues like Medicaid expansion and maternal mortality.
There are things we can do in this year where we can't wait another year, 100,000 insurance. We can't wait a year to talk about maternal mortality. We can't wait another year to start dealing with failed buses. Just the fleet of buses that we have in the state of Georgia have not been invested in 20 years. Come on, give me a break.
Now, if approved, Republican lawmakers say Georgians will realize both short-term and long-term benefits. At the state capitol, Deidre Dukes, Fox 5 News.
Deidre, thanks. Mayor Andre.
Senator from South Carolina could likely be a front runner for perhaps a vice presidential nod.
Absolutely. You know, I do believe that it was a very strategic move to garner the endorsement of Tim Scott, not only because he got that right before the South Carolina primary, but it would be especially smart I'll just say, if he were to consider him strongly for a vice president and to have him on the ticket, because that might be just enough to make more Black men actually come out and support. We know that in the last election, he did make some headway in terms of the Black male demographic, just in terms of expressed support. Maybe not all of them showed up to the degree that people were expecting, but perhaps if he continues down that line by saying, okay, not only am I someone who has a lot of bravado, someone who has the type of character or saying those types of things that make you feel like I'm fighting for you, but for right now, there is a small but loud segment, I believe, specifically in the Black community, that is seriously considering Trump. And to their credit, I would say, to the Trump campaign's credit, I am literally seeing more activity from that campaign, reaching out to Black voters via social media activity. And so they are working for that vote. That is absolutely clear, and it's fair game. So if I were advising the Biden administration, for example, I would say you need to be working at least as hard as your competitor for this vote that you know you need, because this is not the time